Hello everybody, it's Peter with an I, Stawart, and welcome to tutorial number 3 and the second part of the synopsis of Rental Car. We'll pick up where we left off. Max Silvers, the mercurial media and entertainment magnate, tasks a private investigator, Lacey, with finding the author, Donovan Drake. Donovan Drake is a pen name. His real name is Ron. Ron took off on a train bound for Washington State. Nobody had seen him since. One of the employees at the car rental establishment admits to Lacey he did a switcheroo with the rental cars in order to lend Ron a more inexpensive car while charging his boss, Cynthia, for the higher-end car. Lacey follows the new GPS location to a house address very similar to the address of the counselor Ron was supposed to meet with days before. The only difference between the two addresses is that one is a street and one is listed as an avenue. Lacey enters the decrepit, boarded-up house to find evidence of drug use. The words and style of vandalism give the impression it was crafted by a person with mental issues. A squatter flees the scene. Back on the road, Ron and the person who calls himself Gary hold strange conversations. We get a sense the metaphor and symbolism of their conversations touch upon something deeper. There's reason to believe this person is Carlton Libby, and he's preparing to use accelerants to hurt Ron in an attack similar to the one at the shopping mall. Ron finally gets cell phone reception during their stop at a gas station. He gets the voice message he may be traveling with a murderer. It's during this time the identity of all becomes clear. The driver's name really is Gary, and he's not a counselor. Ron went to the wrong address just as Gary was taking off from Washington State to return a rental car hundreds of miles away for a company called Transpac. They hire couriers to drive cross-country. Gary was assigned to ride with a young man whose name was Stephen Alderman. The absent-minded, perpetually stoned young man, Stephen Alderman, showed up at the correct address hours late. He was the squatter Lacey discovered at the condemned house. Ron showed up at the wrong address just in time for a case of mistaken identity. It would be of considerable expense for Gary to drive Ron all the way back, so they agree to move forward and drop him off at the next bus depot. Their conversations are so enthralling, Ron opts to travel the entire distance. It's after their identities are revealed, the ideas behind their previous conversations come to light. Of course, Ron assumed their conversations were therapy and interpreted Gary's words as such. Gary was actually venting frustration after renters trashed the house left to him by his uncle, and the subsequent lawsuit in which they sued him for turning off the electricity. His complaints were heavily steeped in metaphor, hence the confusion. That concludes part 1 of Rental Car. In part 2, new characters are added to the story. Ray Bobby is a serial murderer who learned from an early age to hide his sociopathic tendencies. We first meet him a very short time after he killed an elderly couple. The killing was almost solely for pleasure. His financial profit is a non-issue. Ray Bobby is also a member of the local sheriff's department. He was called to the scene, just as he expected, but upon his return, he sees the red car parked up the driveway of the victim's house is missing. It's highly unlikely, in the rural setting, the car belonged to anyone else. Ray Bobby correctly assumes it belongs to high school kids who were parked off the main road for whatever reason, to drink a beer or make out, and in this case, it was to drink a beer. He need only wait until Monday morning to park near the local high school and wait for the missing red car he's spotted on the night of the murder. Ray Bobby understands how unlikely it is anyone in the red car saw anything, and how it would be better to simply question them and let them be on their way. But as we witness Ray Bobby's demented train of thought, we as the audience are sure he has no choice but to indulge his desire to kill. We get a look into the lives of the 3 kids who occupied the red car that fateful night. It was Joel, Phil, and Tommy who found a hiding place to park and drink a beer. They're rambunctious, free-spirited teenagers. Ray Bobby is correct in assuming they saw nothing. That night they crouched down when a car came, and crouched again when the car left. It matters little. Ray Bobby will do what he will, and quench his dark desire for murder. The kids are saved from their ghoulish fate when Gary passes in a red car that looks exactly like the kids' red car at the crime scene. Earlier, he dropped Ron off at the bus depot and was continuing on the last leg of his journey. Just as Ray Bobby pulls him over on a lonesome, secluded stretch of road to kill him, Ron arrives on the scene. Their conversations apparently had quite an effect on him. Ron was so excited about his harmonic convergence, he needed to share the revelation with Gary. When Ron shouts to Gary, "I have something to say," Ray Bobby shoots Gary's ear off. A chase ensues, and the fate of Ron and Gary is unsure. There's 2 shots of a gun, and we're left to assume Ron and Gary are dead. A short time later, Tina Stone tells the world her close friend, Donovan Drake, was killed, and that he was gay. Max Silvers, the powerful and mercurial figure who orchestrated Tina Stone's lawsuit against the fuel company, immediately sees an opportunity for their next crusade, which is to use recent events to create a portrait of a small town where Ray Bobby was a sheriff. With the help of Tina Stone, he would lead the general public to believe the murder of these 2 men was a hate crime. Their goal would be to harness the powerful repercussions of this heinous act. Max Silvers once again calls upon his private investigator, Lacey, to collect witness accounts and get a feel for the town before the real work begins, and that is to create a depiction of the town that suits their needs. To her dismay, she discovers Ron and Gary were never killed. It was a logistical sleight of hand on the part of Tina Stone to avoid being called out on a lie she told during an interview. Neither of the men had been killed, and neither of them are gay. Rental car is part of a larger body of work, and we come to find there are reasons why Ron would find it so hurtful she would say that about him. In the end of the book, Ron walks with a mysterious figure he met at the train station when he first arrived at Washington State, who happens to be his younger brother Sammy. As Ron recounts the twists and turns involved in his writing career, Ron is revisited by feelings of nervous energy he felt as a teenager when he first labored to put together his graphic novel. The itchy sensations on the back of his scalp make us wonder if criticism from his younger brother, Sammy the little critic, is the real key to unraveling the riddle of his writer's block. In the final sentences, Ron points out a red car and wonders if it's the same rental car he and Gary used. And he says he hopes whoever is using it now is taking care of it. And Sammy asks, why? That's the end. You're welcome to join me for future tutorials about what it all means.